Nancy Drew Mystery Stories, number 38, The Mystery of the Fire Dragon, by Carolyn Keene. Copyright 1961, Grosset and Dunlap. Chapter 1, Mystery in New York. "What else does Ned say, Nancy?" Mr. Drew asked. He was listening intently to a letter his daughter was reading. "Ned likes being a college exchange student in Hong Kong, and he has actually learned to speak some Cantonese, Dad." "Excellent. That, together with his study of Chinese culture, should make him very valuable in a number of fields," Mr. Drew commented. Nancy nodded. "He'd like to go into the United States Intelligence Service." Suddenly, her serious mood changed. "Dad, listen to this," she read. "Nancy, can't you find a mystery to solve in this far-off colony, so I might show you around?" Mr. Drew's eyes twinkled. "Mystery or no mystery, Nancy, you just might get to Hong Kong sooner than you think." "What?" the attractive blue-eyed girl exclaimed. "You mean—" Before Nancy could finish the question, the telephone rang and she went to answer it. "Aunt Eloise!" Nancy cried out. "How super to hear from you! Are you in New York?" "Yes, right in my apartment. I want you to rush here. A most peculiar thing has happened. A real mystery for you to solve." The young blonde detective was intrigued and could hardly wait to get the details from her aunt. Miss Eloise Drew, sister of Nancy's father, lived alone and taught school in the city. Her large, old-fashioned apartment had been converted into 2 separate apartments. Each had its own entrance from the hallway. "2 wonderful Chinese people moved in next door to me a few weeks ago," Aunt Eloise began. "We've become good friends. That's why I want to help them. There's a darling old man we call Grandpa Soong, and his granddaughter Chi-Che, an orphan. She's 18 and a student at Columbia University here. This afternoon, when I returned from a teacher's meeting, I found a strange note on the floor. It had been shoved under the locked door between my apartment and the Soongs." "And what did it say?" Nancy asked eagerly. "It was short and unfinished," Aunt Eloise went on. "I'll read it. Grandpa must think I am visiting student friends from Columbia. The police must not be notified I am away, or Grandpa will be harmed. I am in grave danger because I have found out that—" "The note ends there?" Nancy asked. "Yes, unfortunately. Well, you see why I need you here. I feel that Chi-Che is depending on me to help her, but I don't know where to begin. I thought you might bring Bess and her cousin George with you." "I'd certainly like to, Aunt Eloise, but Dad has just been talking about a trip to Hong Kong. Hold the phone while I ask him about his plans," Nancy requested. After hearing the story, the tall, distinguished-looking lawyer smiled and said, "We won't be leaving for Hong Kong for a week. In the meantime, go to New York if you wish." Nancy hurried back to the telephone. "I'll come tomorrow, Aunt Eloise. What time will you be back from school?" "Between 4 and 4:30. "I'll get in touch with Bess and George right away," Nancy promised. "And in any case, I'll come." "Good," her aunt said. "I'm really terribly worried about Chi-Che. If much more time goes by, it may be too late to help her." After saying goodbye to her aunt, Nancy dialed the number of the Marvin home. "Hi, Bess," she said. "How about a quick trip with me to visit Aunt Eloise?" "Sounds nice, Nancy. But why the big hurry?" "Don't tell me. I know, a mystery has popped up and the trail leads to New York City," guessed blonde, slightly plump Bess. "You're partly right," Nancy laughed. "There is a mystery, but it started in Aunt Eloise's apartment." She briefed her friend on the details. "Oh dear, this really does sound dangerous," Bess exclaimed. "Do you think we should—" Of course I think we should try to help Chi-Chi, Nancy declared. We'll take the early afternoon plane tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 1:15. Okay, I'll be ready, Bess answered. It'll be fun just to go to New York. Shops, theater. Bess, Nancy said firmly. We have a job to do. Chi-Chi's in danger. All right, Detective Drew. Deputy Marvin signing off. See you tomorrow. Nancy chuckled as she called George Fane. She was Bess's cousin, but as unlike her in looks and interest as two people could be. Slender, with dark, short hair, tomboyish George was always ready for adventure. Upon hearing Nancy's invitation, George was eager to fly to New York. The mystery sounds intriguing, she said excitedly. And by the way, Nancy, how about talking your dad into including me in the trip to Hong Kong? I'll do my best. Nancy smiled as she hung up and returned to her father. The girls can go with me, she said. I'll make reservations. Then please tell me about Hong Kong. 10 minutes later, father and daughter were again seated in front of the log fire, which felt cozy on this crisp October evening. Presently, they were joined by the Drews' housekeeper, Mrs. Hannah Gruen. She had lived with them for 15 years, since the death of Mrs. Drew, when Nancy was only 3. Do sit down, Mr. Drew invited her. I'd like to tell you about a case that may take Nancy and me to Hong Kong. The pleasant-faced woman seated herself. Oh my, this sounds so exciting, she commented. I have been retained, the attorney said, to try to locate several people named as beneficiaries in a will which is being contested here. Their last known address was Hong Kong, but they don't answer letters sent to them by the executors. I've decided that the best way to find out what's happening is for me to go there. Naturally, I'd like my detective daughter along to help me if necessary. He smiled. And naturally, a certain Ned Nickerson, who is studying at Chung Chi College outside Hong Kong, would like... Hannah Gruen laughed, and Nancy blushed as her father left the sentence unfinished. Then he continued, Nancy, I'll come home from the office to lunch tomorrow and drive you and the girls to the airport. And now, if you two will excuse me, I'll say good night. Promptly at 1:15 the following afternoon, Nancy and her father were at Bess Marvin's home. A few minutes after that, they picked up George Fane. At the airport, Nancy hugged her father, who wished the 3 sleuths luck. We're ready for anything, George announced. We even have our birth certificates with us, in case we have to identify ourselves. Good, Nancy applauded. I've learned while sleuthing to be prepared for anything. I always carry mine with me. The girls waved as they boarded the airliner, then settled down for the flight to New York. When they reached the terminal in the city, Nancy led the others to the taxi exit, where they took a cab to Miss Drew's apartment house. 4:20, Nancy announced, as she pushed the vestibule bell to her aunt's apartment. The inner door clicked open. Oh, I'm glad Aunt Eloise is home. The tall, attractive woman met the 3 girls as they emerged from the 3rd-floor stop of the self-service elevator. You all look wonderful, Aunt Eloise exclaimed. Nancy kissed her aunt a second time. That's from Dad, and Hannah sends her best wishes too. As soon as they had entered the apartment and the door was closed, the young sleuth said, Aunt Eloise, don't keep us in suspense. Tell us everything about Chi-Chi and what happened. Miss Drew produced the note the Chinese girl had written. At once, Nancy noticed that in the lower right-hand corner of the stationery was a small hand-painted dragon in an oriental shade of red. She pointed this out. It may be a clue, the girl detective remarked. Aunt Eloise could add little to her story, except to say that the Soongs appeared to be very fine people and very fond of each other. They rarely had guests, because Grandpa Soong was at present spending most of his time writing a book. "Let's call on Grandpa soon," Nancy proposed, eager to start work solving the mystery. Her aunt agreed. As Nancy opened the apartment door, she noticed a figure running down the stairway. The person wore dark trousers and a loose coat. Nancy stepped into the hall. At that instant, something in front of her exploded with a loud bang. End of Chapter 1.